The asphalt was slick and bitterly cold, darkened by a steady drizzle that blurred the sky into a dull, weeping gray. Jaxleyn Thornridge knelt in the middle of the empty parking lot, her arms wrapped around her baby sister Rufflin, who screamed with raw, aching lungs. Jaxleyn's sweater was soaked through, her long blonde braid clinging to her back like a wet rope. She tried to shield the baby with her body, but the wind sliced through both of them like glass. Lying at her side was Rufflin, a German shepherd with deep, intelligent eyes and a body trembling from pain. The leash was still clutched in Jaxleyn's numb hand, though the dog had stopped trying to stand. People walked by. They glanced. They frowned. But none of them stopped. Their coats were zipped, their shoes dry. Some avoided eye contact entirely, as if the suffering in front of them were a scene from a distant movie. Not real. Not urgent. Jaxleyn's lips quivered, but she didn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried up hours ago, just like her voice. She had shouted for help until her throat ached, until her sobs became whispers. Now she just waited for something, anything, someone. Rufflin let out a low whine, barely audible, and nudged Jaxleyn's foot with his muzzle. He was hurt. She knew it. His hind leg was stiff and swollen, and blood had dried along his flank. But he stayed. He hadn't left her side since the crash. He'd broken the back window of the car with his body, pulling Jaxleyn and Rufflin out before the flames reached them. And then he'd guided her, limping, through the storm and down the long, wet road. Now they were here, and there was nowhere else to go. A bottle of formula lay cracked beside them. Jaxleyn had tried to feed Rufflin, but the milk had spilled out onto the pavement. A crust of bread had fallen too, untouched, soaking in the rain. She held Rufflin tighter, whispering soft nothings into her ear, pretending they were still safe, pretending their mother would come running from behind one of the buildings. But their mother was gone. Jaxleyn didn't know how or why, only that there had been flashing lights and shouting, and then silence. Afterward, they were told to wait. So they waited, for hours, until everyone disappeared. A woman with a blue umbrella paused a few feet away. She stared, eyes narrowed, but said nothing. She shifted her bag, looked down again, and kept walking. The sound of her heels faded into the mist. Jaxleyn pressed her face into Rufflin's fur. He was cold. She could feel it. But his breathing, though ragged, hadn't stopped. She pulled Rufflin closer and whispered through chattering teeth, "We're not leaving him, okay?" Rufflin blinked slowly and nudged her wrist again. That was all the answer she needed. But something was coming. Something none of them could see yet. Something that would change everything. The rain had turned to mist by the time Colbrielle Coldmere spotted the figures near the far edge of the parking lot. She wasn't looking for anyone, just walking her usual path from the back of the community center where she volunteered. Her red gloves clutched tight around a tote of leftover sandwiches. But then she saw the dog. At first glance, Rufflin looked like a heap of fur soaked by the weather, but something about the way his head lay protectively against the girl's leg caught her attention. Then she saw Jaxleyn. Her face was blank, almost dazed, but her eyes flickered with a kind of stubborn fire. And there was the baby, too quiet now. Colbrielle hesitated. She was no stranger to hardship. She'd spent years helping people who lived in the margins. But this wasn't something she could categorize easily. A child in the rain, a baby in her arms, a wounded K9 dog. She stepped closer, cautiously, so as not to frighten them. "Sweetheart?" she called gently, crouching a few feet away. "Are you okay?" Jaxleyn flinched. Her arms clutched Rufflin tighter. Rufflin raised his head slightly, ears twitching, a low warning in his throat. But he didn't growl. He was watching, judging. "My name's Colbrielle," the woman continued, her voice low and warm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I saw you out here and thought, maybe you need help." Jaxleyn stared at her, eyes unreadable, then looked at Rufflin for direction. The dog gave no sign. The baby whimpered again, and that's when Jaxleyn spoke. "She's cold," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday." Colbrielle's breath caught in her throat. She immediately took off her own coat and placed it over the girls like a tent, shielding them from the wind. Her hands moved with purpose, practical, calm, but her heart was racing. Colbrielle reached into her tote and pulled out a wrapped sandwich and a sealed bottle of juice. "It's not much," she said, "but maybe you can eat something while I call someone?" Jaxleyn shook her head violently. "No police." That stopped Colbrielle cold. "Why not?" she asked softly. The girl didn't answer. She just looked down at Rufflin. He was breathing heavily now, one paw twitching slightly. There was something unspoken in her expression. Something that warned of secrets deeper than anyone could guess. Just then, a voice called from across the parking lot. "Colbrielle, you comin'?" It was Silkred Astro, another volunteer, waving from a pickup. Colbrielle didn't answer. Her focus remained on Jaxleyn. "Listen," she said, leaning closer. "I'm not going to leave you, but if you stay out here much longer, that baby's not going to make it. And your dog, he's running out of time." The girl's chin trembled. For the first time, a tear traced down her cheek. But she didn't speak. She just looked up, right into Colbrielle's eyes, and whispered something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "He saved us, but no one's saving him." Colbrielle knelt lower, brushing damp strands of hair from Jaxleyn's face as carefully as a mother would. The girl didn't move away. It was a fragile kind of trust, but it was something. She reached again for Redolin, checking her color. The baby's skin was pale, lips trembling as she let out a weak cry that barely carried through the wind. "We need to warm her up fast," Colbrielle murmured, mostly to herself, but her eyes flicked back to Rufflin. The dog's breaths had grown shallow, his chest rising in unsteady rhythm. Blood was seeping again through his fur, darker now. The wound wasn't just surface level. He was in danger, real, imminent danger. From across the lot, Silkred Astro had started walking toward them, a blanket folded in her arms. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles as she got closer, her face shifting from confusion to concern with every step. "Colby," she called out, softer this time. "What in God's name?" She stopped cold as soon as she saw them. "Oh no," she whispered. Silkred dropped the blanket to the ground and immediately crouched. "That's a K9, she said under her breath, running her hands gently down Rufflin's side. "Look at the tags. This dog's trained and badly injured." Jaxleyn's body tensed. "Don't take him," she said, suddenly louder. Her voice cracked with urgency. "He's not a thing you just take." Colbrielle placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one's taking him, honey. We're trying to help him. Just help." But Jaxleyn's breathing had become erratic. Her fear was real, and rooted in something deeper than just a child's imagination. Colbrielle glanced at Silkred, who nodded, understanding. "Okay," Silkred said, backing off just a little. "We'll do this your way." The baby whimpered again, and this time, Silkred opened her coat, revealing a small portable heater tucked inside her bag, a tool she often carried when volunteering with the homeless. "I've got something," she said gently, and she turned it on, placing it close but not touching. "It'll help take the bite off the air, at least for the baby." Jaxleyn nodded faintly. Her eyes never left Rufflin. "He pulled us out," she said softly. "When the car flipped, Mom didn't move. He barked and barked until I woke up. Then he dragged us out. I didn't know he was hurt." Tavindra Crowden, a third volunteer, arrived moments later with her truck. "There's a vet 2 streets over," she said quickly. "We can get the dog there fast." But Jaxleyn didn't move. She leaned over Rufflin and whispered something into his ear. The dog's ear twitched. One eye opened, just a sliver. "He knows we're leaving him," she said. "He thinks it's over." Colbrielle felt a knot twist in her chest. Because in that moment, she realized, if they didn't act now, the story of that dog, the hero who saved 2 children from fire and rain, was about to end right there on that asphalt. The sky remained a dull smear of gray as Tavindra's truck backed up slowly, its tires crunching over gravel. Silkred folded the blanket into a makeshift stretcher while Colbrielle kept Jaxleyn calm. her hand never leaving the girl's shoulder. But Rufflin wasn't moving anymore. Not really. His chest barely rose, his eyes fluttered but didn't focus. Jaxleyn gripped his collar like a lifeline, murmuring his name over and over as if sheer will could pull him back. Redolin had finally quieted, her tiny body warmed by the heater and swaddled in Colbrielle's jacket. Yet the air was still thick with urgency, like every second that passed stole another piece of hope. That's when Bucklin Shardbrook appeared. A tall, grizzled man with hands like worn leather and eyes that had seen too much. Bucklin stepped from the driver's side of a dusty maroon truck parked across the lot. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked toward them, slow and steady, his boots silent on the wet pavement. A former handler, once part of a K-9 rescue unit in another life, he recognized the scene before him like muscle memory. "That dog," he finally said, voice low and steady, "needs a handler, right now." Jaxleyn looked up at him, unsure whether to trust the man. Bucklin knelt beside Rufflin, placing one hand gently on the dog's side. He didn't flinch. "He's going into shock," Bucklin muttered. "If we wait any longer, he won't come back." Silkred handed him the corners of the blanket stretcher. "Then let's go." But as they prepared to lift him, Rufflin let out a low, almost imperceptible growl. It wasn't threat. It was fear, resistance, his last line of defense. Bucklin didn't react. He leaned closer, whispering something only Rufflin could hear, and whatever it was, the dog stilled, gave in. With surprising gentleness, Bucklin slid his arms under the dog's body. Jaxleyn stepped forward, alarmed. "You said no one would take him," she cried. Bucklin didn't look at her. "I'm not taking him. I'm carrying him." There was a pause. Then Colbrielle took Jaxleyn's hand and nodded. "We're going together." That seemed to calm her just enough to move. Redolin was transferred carefully into Tevindra's arms, and the whole group, for women, a child, a baby, and a broken dog, loaded into 2 trucks heading toward the vet clinic 2 streets down. As the engine rumbled and they pulled away from the lot, Colbrielle glanced at Bucklin in the rearview mirror. "What did you say to him?" she asked softly. Bucklin kept his eyes on Rufflin's still form in his lap. "Told him he didn't fail," he said. "Told him the kids are alive because of him." His voice cracked on the last word, and Jaxleyn, curled against the door, held back a sob, because for the first time since the crash, someone finally said it out loud. The clinic lights flickered as the storm picked up outside, casting a pale glow on the cracked linoleum floor. Tevindra kicked the door open with her boot while Bucklin stepped in carrying Rufflin, now limp and eerily quiet. The front desk was empty, no ringing bell, no warm greeting. Just silence, broken only by the hum of fluorescent bulbs and the distant buzz of rain. Colbrielle rushed ahead, calling out, "We need help! Emergency!" Her voice echoed down the sterile hallway like a warning shot. A moment later, the door at the end burst open, and a woman in scrubs emerged, eyes widening at the sight of the bloodied dog in Bucklin's arms. Maziru Dustgrove, the vet on shift, had seen all kinds of trauma in her years. Ranch wounds, road accidents, even cruelty cases. But something about Rufflin hit her differently. Maybe it was the way he clung to life despite the pain. Or maybe it was the way Jaxleyn hovered behind, eyes wide and knuckles white, like she just brought in a piece of her own soul. "Set him here," Maziru said, pointing to the exam table. Her tone was sharp, all business. But her hands were already moving with the precision of someone who didn't hesitate when lives were on the line. Jaxleyn tried to follow, but Silkred gently stopped her at the threshold. "Let them work," she whispered. "He needs quiet now." The girl shook her head, lip trembling. "He doesn't like being alone." Colbrielle crouched beside her. "He's not alone," she said. "Look around. We're all here. Because of him." The words lingered like fog between them. Tevindra stood by with Redolin still bundled, her eyes flicking from the baby to the dog table, unsure who to worry about more. It felt like the entire world had been reduced to one hallway. One wounded animal. One child who refused to give up. Inside the room, Maziru worked fast. He's got internal bleeding, she muttered to herself. Torn ligaments. Possible rib fractures. She glanced up at Bucklin, who hadn't left the dog's side. Did he walk on this leg at all? Bucklin nodded once. Only until he got them out of the car. That made Maziru pause. He moved injured? While carrying 2 kids. Her voice cracked slightly. Hell of a dog. Coyote Grave Ravencourt, the clinic's night tech, had just arrived, wiping sleep from his eyes as he stepped in. One look at the scene and he snapped into motion without a word. IVs, monitors, heat lamps. They moved in a rhythm like soldiers in a battlefield triage. Outside, Jaxleyn pressed her hand to the glass window in the door, watching every second. And just before the door closed, she whispered, "You're all I have left, Rufflin. Please, don't go." Hours passed like shadows creeping across the walls. The clinic had grown quiet, save for the soft hum of machines and the ticking of a clock that no one dared to look at. Jaxleyn hadn't moved from the bench outside the treatment room. Her head rested on Colbrielle's lap, eyes open but unfocused, body curled in a tight knot around her fear. Redolin had finally fallen asleep in Tavindra's arms, her breath steady but shallow. The heater continued to hum, warming the baby's cheeks to a soft pink, but it did nothing for the chill inside Jaxleyn's chest. She hadn't spoken a word since they closed the door on Rufflin. Inside, Maziru worked with the kind of focus born of both instinct and desperation. Rufflin's vitals had stabilized, barely. The bleeding had slowed, the leg had been splinted, and his heart, though erratic, was still beating. But his body was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that no injection could reverse. Bucklin remained by his side, one hand resting on the dog's paw, his thumb gently stroking the fur in a rhythm he used to calm his own service dog years ago. Rufflin twitched once, then again weak movements but movements all the same. "I've seen this before," Bucklin murmured. Maziru didn't stop working. In combat, dogs that drag soldiers out of burning vehicles, then collapse like all the strength drained out of them the moment the mission's done. He looked at her. They don't stop because they're hurt. They stop when the ones they protect are safe. Maziru's eyes flicked to the door. "And she's just a kid," she whispered. "God. What would have happened if he hadn't been there?" Neither of them answered. The silence was heavy, sacred. In the hallway, Dexito Hollowind entered through the clinic's back door, a clipboard in one hand and a rain-soaked poncho in the other. "Maisie called me in," he said, nodding at Colbrielle. "I've worked with recovery animals, military, police, ranch. I can help." Jaxleyn stirred at the new voice. She sat up, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Can he walk again?" she asked, voice raw. Dexito crouched to her level. "Maybe. It depends." "On what?" she asked. "On whether he wants to stay," he replied gently. "Sometimes, dogs like Rufflin, they choose." That answer hung in the air, too big for a child to hold. But Jaxleyn nodded, accepting it in her own way. She looked through the window again, then back at Colbrielle. "If he makes it, where will we go?" Colbrielle hesitated. She didn't know. None of them did. But before she could respond, a sharp beeping filled the air. From the other side of the glass, Maziru's voice rang out, urgent. "I need a crash cart now." And just like that, the fragile quiet shattered. Maziru's voice cut like a siren through the clinic. "Crash cart. Now." The beeping from the monitor had turned into one long, piercing tone. Rufflin's heart had flatlined. In one fluid motion, Coyote Grave Ravencourt burst into the room with the cart, his eyes wide but steady. Bucklin stepped back, his breath caught in his throat, unable to take his eyes off the dog lying limp on the table. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Syringes were passed. Pads were placed. Maziru's voice stayed calm, but her jaw was tight, her hands rigid as she administered compressions. "Don't you quit on me," she muttered. "Not after everything." Outside, Jaxleyn shot up at the sound. She pressed both hands to the glass, her breath fogging it instantly. "What's happening?" she cried. Colbrielle stood, pulling her close, trying to shield her from what she couldn't stop. But the girl fought against her grip. "He's dying. I know that sound. That's the sound from when my daddy—" Her voice broke into a sob. Tavindra, holding Redolin tighter, turned away, tears stinging her eyes. No one spoke. No one had answers. They just stood there, helpless, as the seconds stretched into an unbearable silence. Inside the room, Maziru didn't stop. "Charging to 100, she said. Coyote Grave nodded, placing the paddles. "Clear." The jolt made Rufflin's body jump, his legs twitching briefly before falling still again. Nothing. No pulse. She tried again. "Clear." Another shock. A flicker on the screen, then flatline. She stared for a beat too long, swallowing hard. "Come on, soldier," Bucklin whispered under his breath, his fists clenched. "You didn't survive all that just to give up now." He leaned down, resting his forehead gently against Rufflin's. "She's still out there. That little girl. You leave now, and she's gonna break." Then, like a whisper through stormwind, the monitor beeped once. Then again. A slow, stuttering rhythm returned, weak but real. Maziru's hands froze in midair. Her eyes widened. "We've got a pulse," she whispered. Bucklin exhaled so hard it sounded like a gasp. Coyote Grave shook his head in disbelief, then immediately adjusted Rufflin's for. "He's fighting," Maziru said softly. "He's not done." The relief in the room was instant, but fragile, like glass laid gently on a pillow. Jaxleyn could feel it through the glass. She didn't know what had changed, but something had. Her tears stopped. She stood straighter. "He's still with us," she whispered. "I knew he wouldn't leave." Colbrielle looked down at her, touched by the certainty in her voice. And inside the room, as Rufflin lay still with wires around his chest and warmth slowly returning to his skin, a shift had happened. He had chosen to stay. By the next morning, the clinic smelled of coffee, antiseptic, and relief. Rufflin lay still under soft blankets, a warm patch of fur rising and falling in rhythm with the beeps of the heart monitor beside him. His eyes had fluttered open once during the night, just long enough to find Jaxleyn sleeping on a chair near the glass, her head resting against Colbrielle's shoulder. Bucklin had barely moved from the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching like a silent guardian. Maziru had done all she could medically. Now it was up to Rufflin's will and time. But the quiet wouldn't last. At 9:12 a.m., the clinic door opened with a metallic creak, and a figure stepped inside. Dark coat, silver badge clipped to the belt, folder in hand. His name was Detective Silkrid Astro. Not the volunteer, not the neighbor. This Silkrid was all business, and the look on his face made it clear that whatever peace had settled overnight was about to be disrupted. Colbrielle met him near the reception. "You came fast," she said. "I got the call from the station this morning. That dog, he's in the system." He lifted the folder. "And so is she." He motioned toward Jaxleyn, who was now awake, her eyes narrowing as the stranger looked her way. "What do you mean she's in the system?" Colbrielle asked, voice firm. Silkrid opened the file. "Her name is Jaxleyn Thornridge. Her mother, Tavindra Thornridge, went missing 6 weeks ago during a domestic violence investigation. The house was found abandoned. The car was reported stolen. That same vehicle matches the one found overturned outside Ridge Hollow Hospital yesterday. The kids were never officially listed as recovered. No one knew where they'd gone." Colbrielle turned slowly toward Tavindra, who stood pale and stunned in the corner, Redolin now cradled tightly in her arms. "You said you were a friend of the family," Colbrielle whispered. Tavindra didn't speak. Her silence screamed louder than any answer could. Jaxleyn stepped forward, her small hand resting on the glass door leading into Rufflin's room. "She didn't leave us," she said. "She tried to protect us. From him." Colbrielle's voice shook. "From who, Jaxleyn?" But the girl didn't answer. She just stared at the detective. Silkrid's eyes flicked back to the folder. "There's more," he muttered. This dog, Rufflin, was previously assigned to Officer Coyote Grave Ravencourt, who disappeared from the force last year under suspicious circumstances. This isn't just a lost dog and a broken-down car. This whole thing, it's tied together. Maziru stepped into the room just then. "You're gonna want to hear this," she said to Silkred. "Rufflin just tried to stand. He's weak, but he's awake. And when he saw Jaxleyn through the window," she paused. "He wagged his tail." Rufflin's eyes blinked open slowly, the light above him sharp and unfamiliar. His body felt heavy, patched with pain, but there was something stronger than the ache. A pull. Through the window, Jaxleyn stood, small and motionless, her hands pressed against the glass. The moment their eyes met, something deep inside him stirred. His tail moved, just barely. But enough. Enough for everyone to see. Bucklin leaned closer. "That's not reflex," he said, voice low. "That's recognition." Inside the clinic office, Silkred flipped through photos from the file, spreading them across the desk. "Look at this," he muttered to Colbrielle. One image showed Rufflin in uniform beside a man. Officer Ravencourt, lean and proud. Another, more recent photo showed that same man in civilian clothes. But Colbrielle frowned. "That's not Ravencourt," she whispered. "That's the man who came into the clinic last month, asking about abandoned dogs." Silkred's brow furrowed. "He's using a false identity. That's why he vanished from the department. He's not missing. He's hiding." Jaxleyn was now inside Rufflin's room, her tiny fingers stroking his fur gently. Maziru had allowed it, against protocol. But something about the way the dog's breathing calmed under the girl's touch made it impossible to say no. Tavindra lingered in the hallway, her face pale, eyes hollow. She knew the truth was inching closer, and that it wouldn't be kind. Colbrielle approached her slowly. "Was it Ravencourt?" she asked quietly. Tavindra nodded, barely. "He was never supposed to find us again." Silkred stepped in, tone sharp. How did a decorated officer go from search and rescue to hunting down a woman and her kids? Tavindra swallowed hard. He changed. After his last partner died in the line of duty, something inside him twisted. Rufflin was reassigned to Daniel, my husband. But when Daniel died in that crash, Ravencourt blamed me, said I stole everything from him. Her voice broke. "So we ran." Bucklin entered the room as Rufflin lifted his head slightly, gaze flicking between faces. "He knows more than we do," Bucklin murmured. "K9s are trained to remember patterns, people, smells. If he saw Ravencourt again, he'd react." Jaxleyn leaned down and kissed Rufflin's forehead. "He protected us once. He'll do it again if he has to." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Just then, the clinic door creaked open. Cold air swept in. Footsteps echoed. And standing in the entrance, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, was a man no one had seen in months. "Evening," he said calmly. "Heard there was a wounded dog here I used to know." The man stepped fully into the light, and there was no mistaking it now. Coyote Grave Ravencourt. His eyes scanned the room like a wolf searching for an opening, but they paused when they met Jaxleyn's. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply placed herself between him and Rufflin, standing tall despite her size. Colbrielle stepped forward, her voice firm. "You need to leave." But Ravencourt smirked, calm as ever. "I'm not here for trouble. I just came to see my dog." Bucklin stepped in next, eyes narrowed. "Your dog made his choice the day he pulled those kids out of that wreck. He's not yours anymore." For a moment, Ravencourt said nothing. Then he took a slow step forward. "You don't get it. That dog is mine. He remembers me. Don't you, boy?" he called out, voice smooth. Rufflin lifted his head slightly, but there was no warmth in his eyes, only recognition and warning. Maziru had silently moved toward the back, dialing her emergency contact. Silkred placed a hand on the small of his back, where his badge and weapon sat, just in case. But it was Rufflin who made the decision. As Ravencourt took another step, the dog's muscles tensed. His body was weak, barely able to move, but a low growl rumbled from his chest. It wasn't loud, but it was full of memory, a pain. of defiance. Ravencourt froze. His eyes narrowed. "So that's how it is," he muttered. Suddenly, Jaxleyn reached out and touched Rufflin's ear. "Stay," she whispered. "You don't have to fight anymore." Rufflin's growl stopped, but his eyes stayed locked on the man. Bucklin took the opportunity. "You need to go, Ravencourt, before this gets worse." And finally, for the first time, the man backed down. He looked around the room, eyes full of something like grief or madness. "He was the last good thing I had," he said softly. "And now even he's turned." He turned and walked out into the rain, disappearing like smoke into the mist. Silkred followed seconds later. And just like that, the room exhaled. The weight lifted. Jaxleyn turned back to Rufflin and smiled through her tears. "You stayed," she whispered. "You stayed." In the weeks that followed, Rufflin recovered slowly. Not just his body, but his spirit. And when adoption papers were filed, it was Jaxleyn Thornridge's name listed beside him. Not as owner, as family, because some heroes wear badges, and others simply wait in the rain. Wounded, forgotten, but never letting go.